The night Henry walked away, the porch light was the only thing still fighting the dark. Hailey stood barefoot on cold wood, a thin cardigan pulled tight around her shoulders. One hand pressed to her stomach as if holding herself together could keep everything else from falling apart. Behind her, the small house smelled like chamomile and worry. Ahead of her, the gravel driveway glittered with rain, each drop a tiny knife, each second a warning. Henry didn't slam the door. That was the cruel part. He moved quietly, like a man trying to leave without leaving damage, as if softness could make abandonment less real. His keys trembled in his hand. His jaw was set in that stubborn way Hailey used to mistake for strength. And when he looked back, his eyes didn't hold hatred. They held fear. "Just not tonight," he said, voice raw, like he'd swallowed something sharp. Hailey's mouth opened, but what came out wasn't the speech she'd practiced in her head. It was only one word. Small, cracked, honest. Henry. That name used to feel like home. That night, it sounded like a plea. He hesitated, almost stepping back, almost choosing her. The rain hit harder, and the wind shoved at his coat, urging him forward. Then he did the thing that would rewrite her life. He shook his head as if he couldn't bear to carry her pain, and he turned away. Headlights washed over her face. Bright, blinding, temporary. And then the car rolled down the driveway, tires crunching over wet gravel, leaving behind a silence so heavy it felt like it could break bones. Hailey didn't chase him. She didn't collapse dramatically in the rain. She didn't fall to her knees like a movie scene begging for mercy. She did something far more devastating. She stayed standing until the red taillights disappeared, and only then, only when the night proved he wasn't coming back, she let one single tear slide down her cheek, because she already knew what her pride refused to say out loud. He had walked away when she needed him most. The next morning, the sun rose anyway. As if the world didn't care that her future had been stolen. The farm didn't pause for heartbreak. The hospital bills didn't pause for grief. The town didn't pause for a woman left behind. And Hailey, even with her heart split clean in two, didn't pause either. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. The seasons turned like pages she didn't ask to read. Spring arrived with muddy boots and exhausted prayers. Summer brought long evenings of sweat and stubborn hope. Autumn came with harvest fields and empty chairs. And winter returned like an old enemy, carrying the same sharp cold she remembered from the night he left. She learned how to be strong in ways no one claps for, strong enough to sign paperwork with shaking hands, strong enough to smile at neighbors who looked at her with pity, strong enough to work double shifts at the small-town clinic and still come home to fix a leaking roof because there was no one else to do it. She learned how to swallow the question that haunted her every time she laid her head on the pillow. Why wasn't I worth staying? Years passed, and somewhere far from that porch light and that gravel driveway, Henry became the man he once swore he would be. Successful, respected, polished. The kind of man people introduce with pride, the kind of name printed on brochures and donation plaques. But success has a way of turning loud when your conscience is quiet, because no matter how high he climbed, there was one moment he could never outrun, the moment he heard her say his name in the rain. Then, on an ordinary evening that didn't look like destiny at all, Hailey came home to find her porch light glowing against the dusk. Warm, familiar, almost cruel. She set her keys on the counter, kicked off her boots, and exhaled the kind of tired that lives in the bones. That was when it happened. A knock. Not the neighbor's quick tap. Not the delivery man's casual rhythm. This knock was slow, careful, like the person on the other side knew the door was more than wood and paint. Like they knew it was a boundary. Hailey froze. Her heart didn't flutter with romance. It tightened with instinct, with memory. The air felt too still, like the whole house was holding its breath. She took one step toward the door, then another, her hand hovering over the knob as if touching it could reopen every wound she'd spent years stitching closed. Another knock. And this time, something inside her whispered the impossible. No, not him. Hailey swallowed, forcing her voice to be steady, forcing her spine to remember the woman she had become. Who is it? Silence. Then from the other side of the door, a voice she hadn't heard in years, deeper now, rougher, full of something that sounded like remorse trying not to break apart. Hailey? Her name. Not a greeting, not a charm, a confession. Her fingers tightened on the knob. Her pulse thundered, because suddenly the years collapsed into one single heartbeat, and she was back on that porch again, rain in the air, his taillights leaving her behind. Except this time, he wasn't driving away. He was here. He had returned. And the question that no amount of strength could silence rose in her chest like a storm. Was it too late? Stay with this story until the end, because what Hailey does after she opens that door will decide whether love can be rebuilt or whether some losses are meant to remain forever. Stay with me until the end, because the moment that door opens, everything changes. And you'll want to see what she chooses. If you love stories of second chances, subscribe to Redeemed Hearts now. The town of Meadowridge sat between cornfields and two-lane roads that forgot your name. Hailey learned early that life there was made of weather, work, and quiet promises. Her farm wasn't big, but it was honest. Fences she painted herself, soil she trusted. The clinic down the hill knew her footsteps, her voice, her calm under pressure. She was the woman people called when trucks slid off icy roads and babies came too fast. And Henry was supposed to be the one who stood beside her when life turned brutal. He had once sworn it on a summer night under fireflies, like vows were simple. That week, the sky stayed the color of steel, and the air smelled like a storm deciding. Hailey's father had been gone 2 years, but his debts still lived in the mailbox. A tractor repair invoice sat on the kitchen table like a threat written in numbers. The clinic had cut hours, yet emergencies kept arriving as if poverty had a schedule. Hailey carried it all with a straight spine, refusing to let anyone see her hands shake. Henry watched her juggle it, and something in him tightened instead of stepping closer. He called it stress, but it was fear. Fear of being needed more than he could handle. Henry had always wanted more than Meadowridge could offer on a quiet day. He loved the town, but he hated how small it made him feel in his own ambition. A developer from the city had been courting his ideas, his charm, his hunger. There was talk of contracts, promotions, a fast road that looked like destiny. He told Hailey it would be temporary, a leap that would secure their future. Hailey listened, but her eyes kept drifting to the bills and the darkening clouds. Because temporary didn't sound like love when the roof needed fixing tonight. The call came on a Thursday, right as Hailey pulled her boots on for a night shift. A truck had jackknifed near County Road 9, and the driver was bleeding badly. She drove through rain, hands steady on the wheel, heart steady by pure discipline. At the clinic, fluorescent lights hummed like nerves, and the waiting room overflowed. Hailey moved from room to room with quiet authority, stitching and reassuring and praying. Then the nurse handed her another chart, and Hailey's breath caught hard in her throat. The name on it was her mother's, collapsed at home, chest pain, ambulance inbound. Hailey stood in the hallway for half a second, the world narrowing to a thin line. Then she did what she always did. She took action before fear could take her. She called Henry with fingers that felt numb, her voice controlled but stripped bare. "Henry, I need you," she said. And the words were not romantic, they were survival. Her mother arrived pale and sweating, and Hailey's mind began calculating costs instantly. Insurance would barely cover it. The hospital transfer would be expensive, the aftercare worse. Hailey swallowed panic because she knew the truth. This could sink the farm completely. Henry came to the clinic in the rain, hair damp, jacket half-zipped, eyes wide. For a moment, relief touched Hailey's chest like warmth. He was here. He showed up. But then she saw it. The way he looked at the monitors, the paperwork, the chaos. Not like a man ready to hold her, but like a man measuring the weight of it. The doctor spoke of tests, possible surgery, days in the hospital 2 counties over. Hailey reached for Henry's hand, needing a human anchor more than an answer. Henry's fingers curled around hers, and still, his gaze kept sliding toward the exit. Later, in the parking lot, rain tapping the hood like impatient fingers, Henry went quiet. "I can't do this," he finally said, the sentence landing like a sudden drop in temperature. Hailey stared at him, waiting for the next part that would make it make sense. I have the offer, he added, as if ambition was a shield against responsibility. Hailey's lips parted, but no sound came, only the sharp taste of disbelief. My mom might not be okay, she whispered, and the words trembled despite her strength. Henry flinched, and that flinch told her everything before he said another thing. He wasn't leaving because he didn't love her, not in the way people imagine villains. He was leaving because love demanded courage, and Henry's courage was unfinished. He had spent his whole life terrified of drowning in someone else's needs. He wanted to be the man who saved the day, not the man who stayed through the mess. He looked at Hailey and saw a lifetime of storms he couldn't control. And instead of stepping closer, he reached for the only thing he knew how to hold. Control looked like a city contract, a clean slate, a door that didn't ask him to bleed. Hailey didn't beg, but her voice cracked in the most human way. "You're really doing this now?" she asked, not screaming, just trying to understand reality. Henry's eyes shone like he was fighting himself, but his pride kept tightening his jaw. "I'll send money," he offered, as if love could be wired in monthly payments. Hailey shook her head slowly, her pain turning into something colder and clearer. "Don't," she said, and her quiet was sharper than any accusation. "If you leave tonight, Henry, don't come back acting like that makes it better." He stood there, rain sliding off his hair, and for a moment he almost stayed. Hailey could see it, the war behind his eyes, the part of him still wanting home. But then his phone buzzed with another message from the city, and he read it like scripture. He exhaled, stepped back, and the space between them filled with everything unsaid. "I'm sorry," he murmured. But it sounded like surrender, not repentance. Hailey's throat tightened, yet she refused to let him see her fall apart. So she only nodded once, as if giving permission was the last thing she would ever give him. The drive back to the farm was a blur of headlights and betrayal. Hailey's hands stayed steady, but her heart felt like it had been left on the pavement. She checked on her mother between calls, filed forms, argued with insurance, signed consent papers. She slept in a chair beside the hospital bed, jaw clenched, eyes burning dry. When dawn came, the world looked normal: birds, coffee, nurses laughing softly at the desk. That normality was the cruelest part, because Hailey felt like a building after an earthquake. Still standing, yes, but cracked in places no one could see. Henry didn't call the next day, and he didn't come back the day after that. His silence wasn't loud like cruelty. It was quiet like avoidance, like self-protection. Meadowridge noticed because small towns read absence like headlines. At the diner, women lowered their voices when Hailey walked in for coffee. At the feed store, a man patted her shoulder as if she were already a widow. Hailey kept her chin up, paid her bill, and walked out into the cold air alone. She refused to become a story people told for entertainment over pie. When her mother was released, frail and shaken, Hailey drove her home through gray light. She carried grocery bags, medicine bottles, and fear, all at the same time. At night, she sat at the kitchen table with a calculator and a notebook full of numbers. She circled expenses, crossed out luxuries, negotiated with herself like survival was a contract. The farm needed feed, the roof needed patching, the truck needed tires before winter. Hailey wrote a list called non-negotiable, and at the top she wrote one thing: we stay. Not because it was easy, but because leaving would feel like dying on purpose. She went back to the clinic 2 days later, eyes tired, voice steady, hands sure. A child came in with a fever. An old man came in with a cough that sounded like regret. Hailey treated them all with the same calm, because people's pain didn't pause for hers. In the supply closet, she allowed herself 1 minute with her forehead against the shelf. She didn't cry loudly. She breathed, counted, steadied herself like she'd been trained for it. Then she walked back out, because resilience wasn't a personality for her. It was a job, a choice, a discipline she practiced every single hour. The first time someone asked about Henry, Hailey answered without bitterness. "He's gone," she said. And that was all, like a door quietly shut. The second time, she smiled politely and changed the subject. The third time, she realized something that made her spine straighten even more. If she kept explaining him, she would keep carrying him. So she stopped giving Henry space in her mouth, in her day. in her future plans. She let the town wonder, and she kept building her life anyway. Weeks later, a letter arrived with Henry's signature scrawled at the bottom. Not a love letter, just a legal update, forwarding address, a cold promise of support. Hailey stared at it for a long time, feeling the last thread of hope go slack. She didn't tear it dramatically. She folded it carefully, like even disappointment deserved order. Then she opened her notebook and wrote down 3 more shifts she could pick up. She called a neighbor about trading labor for hay, and she scheduled a meeting with the bank. Because if Henry had chosen escape, Hailey would choose strategy. The bank smelled like old paper and judgment. But Hailey walked in like she belonged. She sat across from the loan officer and spoke clearly, without pleading, without trembling. She laid out her plan. Clinic hours, farm income, repairs prioritized, a realistic timeline. The man looked surprised, as if he expected her to be smaller after being left. Hailey watched his expression shift as he realized she was not asking to be rescued. She was asking for a chance to invest in herself, and she had the numbers to prove it. When she left, the air felt colder, but her steps felt steadier than they had in months. That night, Hailey stood on the same porch where Henry's taillights had disappeared. The sky was clear now, stars sharp as pins, the wind quiet like a held breath. She wrapped her cardigan tighter, not because she was fragile, but because she was human. In the distance, the fields lay dark and sleeping, waiting for the work of morning. Hailey looked at the driveway and felt a strange kind of peace settle into her ribs. Not forgiveness, not yet. Just the solid truth of who she was becoming. And softly, to the night itself, she made a vow. I will not break. I will rebuild. The next weeks did not arrive gently. They arrived like bills, like winter, like proof. Hailey woke before sunrise, not because she was disciplined, but because panic didn't sleep. She fed the animals with fingers stinging from cold, then drove straight to the clinic. In the mirror, she watched her own face change. Less softness, more sharp edges of resolve. She didn't become cruel. She became efficient, the way people do when life stops offering mercy. And every day the same thought followed her like a shadow she couldn't outrun. Henry had left, and the world had kept going as if that was normal. Her mother's recovery turned the house into a quiet battlefield of routine and fear. Medicine schedules were taped to the fridge like fragile promises. Hailey learned to listen for every cough in the night, every small sound that meant danger. She cooked meals that were simple but nourishing, because she could not afford collapse. In the evenings, she worked on the farm repairs with a headlamp and stubborn hands. Her neighbors offered help, but Hailey accepted only what didn't feel like pity, because she refused to be the town's tragedy dressed in denim and silence. The first time she drove past the spot where Henry used to park his truck, she didn't stop. There was no dramatic flashback, no soft music, no longing that made her weak. There was only a hollow ache, the kind that lives behind the ribs and never asks permission. She remembered the way he once lifted her into his arms after long shifts. She remembered how he promised that if life ever got hard, they would face it together. And now she understood something painful and strangely clarifying. Promises were easy in summer. Character was proven in winter. At the clinic, the town kept coming with problems money couldn't solve. A teenager with bruises she wouldn't explain. A farmer with hands cracked open from work and pride. A mother who cried quietly because her child's prescription cost more than groceries. Hailey treated them all with care that felt almost sacred, even when her heart felt empty. She didn't perform kindness for applause. She offered it because pain recognized pain, and somewhere inside her, the nurse she was became the woman she needed to be. One afternoon, her supervisor asked her to lead a small outreach program. It was barely funded, barely staffed, just a few supplies and a borrowed van. They would drive to outlying farms, check blood pressure, deliver basic medication, offer support. Hailey said yes without hesitation, even though her schedule was already full. Because if suffering had taught her anything, it was this. Isolation kills quietly. She didn't want anyone else in Meadowridge to feel abandoned in their hardest moment, even if she had to be the one who showed up with steady hands and hope. Henry's name stopped coming up in direct questions, but it still lived in corners. A woman at the diner said, "You're so strong. and her tone carried an unspoken "for being left." A man at the feed store asked if Hailey needed help repairing her fence, then glanced away awkwardly. Even kindness felt sharp sometimes because it highlighted what she had lost. Hailey began choosing her own kind of solitude, less lonely, more intentional. She stopped lingering in places where her absence would be noticed. She started spending her free hours building something no one could take from her. The bank allowed the loan, but the terms were unforgiving and the timeline tight. Hailey pinned the repayment schedule beside her mother's medicine list. 2 columns of responsibility, both demanding perfection. She took an extra shift on weekends. Then another. Then another. Some nights she came home so exhausted she sat in her truck and stared at the steering wheel. Not because she wanted to give up, but because her body begged for one day without crisis. Then she would inhale, straighten her shoulders, and walk inside anyway. Her mother tried to apologize for being a burden, and Hailey refused the word immediately. "You're not a burden," she said, voice firm, almost fierce. But when her mother fell asleep, Hailey stood at the sink with hands in soapy water and trembled. There was a loneliness in being the strong one that no one warned you about. No one brought you soup. No one held you while you cried. You just held yourself again and again until you forgot what it felt like to be held. Hailey hated Henry for making her learn that kind of strength. One Sunday, she went to the church hall for a community fundraiser, more out of obligation than faith. They were raising money for a family whose barn had burned down. Hailey helped serve chili, smiled politely, listened to stories, clapped at the right moments. Then she overheard 2 women whispering near the dessert table. "He's doing so well in the city," one said, as if success erased everything. "I heard he's dating someone important," the other added, careless as spilled sugar. Hailey's spoon froze mid-air, and her chest tightened with a sudden, humiliating heat. It wasn't jealousy, not in the childish sense. It was the sheer cruelty of imagining Henry building a new life while hers had been on fire. Hailey set the spoon down carefully, as if breaking something would confirm weakness. She walked outside into the cold night air, her breath coming out in pale clouds. For the first time since he left, her eyes stung sharply with tears she didn't invite. She pressed her palm to her sternum and whispered to herself like a command, "Breathe. Don't let him own you from a distance." That night, she went home and did something that surprised even her. She pulled out a box from the closet, old photos, ticket stubs, the small souvenirs of us. She didn't burn them. She didn't throw them in the trash like a performance. She simply looked at each piece with calm honesty and asked one question: "Does this help me become who I'm meant to be, or does it keep me trapped?" One by one, she placed the items back, not as sacred relics, but as history. Then she taped the box shut and slid it into the farthest corner of the attic. A week later, her mother had a setback: dizziness, shortness of breath, fear in her eyes. Hailey drove her back to the clinic, hands steady even as her mind raced. The doctor adjusted medication, ordered tests, advised rest and monitoring. Hailey nodded, asked the right questions, took notes like she was managing a crisis at work. But on the drive home, her mother's hand reached for hers. "I'm sorry he left," her mother whispered, voice thin but certain. And Hailey's throat tightened, because even in illness her mother saw the wound clearly. "I'm not," Hailey said, surprising herself with the truth in her own words. Her mother turned, confused. Hailey kept her eyes on the road, watching the fields blur past like chapters turning. "If he stayed," she continued softly, "I would have spent my life afraid he'd leave." Her voice didn't shake. It settled like something finally put in the right place. "I don't want love that needs the world to be easy to exist." Her mother squeezed her hand, and Hailey felt something inside her unclench. Just a little. In the months that followed, Hailey's outreach program became her quiet rebellion against abandonment. She delivered medicine to elderly couples who hadn't seen a doctor in years. She sat with anxious mothers and explained symptoms with patience and dignity. She checked on farmers who would rather lose a limb than admit they were scared. The van became familiar, the back stocked with basic supplies, the front filled with purpose. And slowly, the town began to look at Hailey differently, not as the woman who was left, but as the woman who stayed and became a shelter. One late autumn afternoon, A storm rolled in fast, dark clouds, violent wind, rain like thrown gravel. A call came from a farmhouse on the outskirts. An accident, a deep cut, possible concussion. Hailey drove through the storm, the van swaying as if the road itself was alive. She arrived to find a man on the floor, blood on his temple, his wife shaking. Hailey worked quickly. Pressure, bandage, calm voice, clear instructions. When the man finally stabilized, his wife grabbed Hailey's arm with wet eyes. "Thank you," she said. "You always come. You always show up." Those words followed Hailey all the way home. You always show up. She parked in her driveway and sat in the dark for a long moment, listening to the rain. That sentence felt like a mirror held up to everything Henry hadn't been. And for the first time, Hailey realized her grief was changing shape. It wasn't just sadness anymore. It was a line drawn in the sand. Whoever loved her in the future would have to be someone who stayed. Near the start of winter, a letter arrived from a law office in the city. Not from Henry directly, but his name was printed cleanly at the top. It outlined a formal arrangement, financial support, structured payments, legal wording too polished to feel human. Hailey read it once, then again, her jaw tightening with a familiar mix of anger and clarity. It wasn't help. It was guilt dressed as responsibility. It didn't come with a conversation, an apology, a willingness to stand in her reality. So Hailey did the only thing that felt like self-respect. She refused to sign. That night, she stepped onto her porch and let the winter air bite her cheeks awake. The fields were quiet, the town lights distant, the sky scattered with cold stars. Hailey wrapped her arms around herself, not in weakness but in fierce protection. She looked down the driveway where Henry's taillights had vanished months ago. Her heart ached, but it didn't beg anymore. It simply remembered. Then she whispered into the dark, a promise that sounded like a new identity. "If you ever come back, Henry, you don't get the old me. You face the woman I became." 2 years passed the way hard seasons do, quietly, relentlessly, changing everything without asking. Hailey's hands grew stronger, her shoulders steadier, her heart less willing to be fooled. The farm still wasn't perfect, but it stood, fences repaired, roof patched, debts shrinking slowly. At the clinic, her outreach program had become essential, stitched into Meadowridge like a lifeline. People trusted her because she never made pain feel like an inconvenience. She didn't talk about Henry anymore, not because she had forgotten, but because she had evolved past explaining. And still, some nights she caught herself listening for a truck that would never turn into her driveway. Winter softened into spring, and spring warmed into a bright, restless summer. Meadowridge prepared for the annual Harvest Preview Festival, food trucks, live music, farm booths. Hailey didn't care much for festivals, but her outreach team had a small booth to offer free screenings. She pinned her hair back, pulled on a simple denim jacket, and showed up before dawn. She arranged pamphlets, checked the blood pressure cuffs, filled a cooler with bottled water. Everything about her moved with purpose, because purpose was how she kept grief from becoming a home. Then she looked up and saw a black SUV pull into the gravel lot like it didn't belong there. It wasn't the vehicle that made her freeze. Meadowridge had seen city cars come and go. It was the way people turned their heads, the ripple of sudden attention like wind across tall grass. The SUV door opened, and a man stepped out in tailored clothes that didn't know dust. He moved with the confidence of someone who had been around money long enough to forget its weight. The sun hit his face, and Hailey's breath caught hard, immediate, involuntary. Because the man walking toward the festival entrance wasn't a stranger. It was Henry, older, sharper, and wearing success like armor. Time did a strange thing in that moment. It folded. Hailey saw him as he was the night he left. Wet hair, trembling keys, fear in his eyes. Then she saw him as he stood now. Clean lines, expensive watch, a calm that looked rehearsed. He had gained something in those years, and it wasn't just wealth. He looked controlled, like he had learned how to hide his guilt behind a professional face. But guilt has a way of living in the eyes, no matter how polished the rest becomes. And when Henry turned his head and his gaze swept the crowd, Hailey knew he was searching. She told herself to look away. She had built a life without him, brick by brick, breath by breath, refusing the collapse. She didn't owe him a reaction. She didn't owe him a scene. So she focused on the woman in front of her, wrapped the cuff around her arm, smiled. Deep breath. Hailey said gently, "You're doing great." But the festival noises faded at the edges because her body recognized Henry before her mind allowed it. Her pulse hammered like it was angry at the past for returning in daylight. Henry stopped near the edge of the booth area, speaking to a local official, shaking hands. The official laughed too loudly, like proximity to success might be contagious. Someone murmured Henry's name with the kind of awe Meadowridge reserved for men who made it out. Hailey listened without looking, and each syllable scraped old wounds she thought had scarred fully. He was back in town, and he hadn't come quietly. There were brochures being passed around, a banner near the stage with a logo she didn't recognize. A philanthropic initiative, someone said. A donation to expand rural healthcare services. Hailey's outreach partner, Marcy, leaned closer, eyes wide. "Hailey," she whispered, as if saying it softly would soften reality. "That's Henry Caldwell. He's on the board of the new healthcare fund." Hailey's jaw tightened. Of course he was. Henry always wanted to be important, always wanted his name on something permanent. And now he was bringing money into the very world Hailey had bled to keep running. The irony tasted bitter, like metal on the tongue. Henry began walking toward the clinic booth, and Hailey felt the air shift. Her hand stayed steady as she wrote down a blood pressure reading. She finished the screening, thanked the woman, and offered her a pamphlet with a warm smile. Then she reached under the table for another form like she had all the time in the world. But inside, her ribs felt too tight, her lungs too small, her heart too loud. Henry came closer, and the years between them felt suddenly paper-thin. When he stopped in front of the booth, Hailey still didn't look up. "Hailey." He said her name like a man stepping into a church after years of avoiding confession. The sound of his voice was deeper, but the hesitation was the same. Hailey slowly lifted her eyes, and the festival sunlight revealed everything she had learned. She wasn't the girl on the porch anymore. She was the woman who survived what he couldn't stand beside. And her expression didn't ask him why. It asked him what he thought he was doing here. Henry's face shifted when he saw her clearly, like he hadn't allowed himself to imagine her changed. Her hair was pulled back, her sleeves rolled, her hands sure on the clipboard. There was a quiet authority in her posture that made her look untouchable. For half a second, Henry looked like a man who had forgotten how to breathe. He opened his mouth, closed it, swallowed. He started, then stopped as if words were suddenly too small for the damage. Hailey waited without mercy, not cruel, just finished with rushing men. "I didn't know you'd be here," Henry finally said, and Hailey almost laughed. Meadowridge was small. There were no secrets, only delayed news. "Funny," she replied, voice even, almost soft. "I didn't know you'd come back at all." Henry flinched, like her calm cut deeper than anger ever could. "I came because there's a project," he said, motioning vaguely to the banner behind him. "A healthcare expansion fund, rural clinics, outreach programs." Hailey looked at the logo, then back at him, eyes narrowing with quiet comprehension. "You're funding this," she said, stating it, not asking. Henry nodded once, a small movement that carried too much meaning. "I'm part of it," he corrected carefully. "I wanted to help." Help? The word landed wrong. Hailey's mind flashed to her mother's trembling hand, the loan papers, her nights in a chair by a hospital bed. Help was what she had needed when Henry had been standing in the rain with keys in his hand. Now he wanted to help with money, the one thing he had always trusted more than emotional courage. Hailey leaned slightly forward, lowering her voice so no one else could hear. "Don't do this," she said, calm but firm. Henry blinked. "Do what?" "Turn your guilt into a public performance," Hailey replied, words controlled like a scalpel. Henry's throat worked visibly, and for a moment the polished man slipped. "I'm not trying to," he began, then stopped again, his eyes shining unexpectedly. Hailey saw it then. Whatever success he had built, it had not erased the regret. The crowd behind Henry shifted, voices rising, music warming up on the stage. A man in a suit approached Henry with a clipboard, smiling like a camera was nearby. "Henry, we need you for the announcement in 10, the man said brightly. Henry nodded automatically, then looked back at Hailey like he wanted to say 100 things at once. I needed to see you," he said quietly. Hailey's expression didn't soften. It didn't harden either. It stayed steady, because steadiness was her armor now. "You're seeing me," she said. "Congratulations." Henry winced, but he didn't step away. That was new. He stood there, taking the blow without defending himself, without turning it into an argument. "I'm not here to make excuses," he murmured. Hailey's eyes flicked briefly over his expensive suit, the watch, the clean edges of him. "You already made your choice," she said. "You chose the life that didn't include my hardest days." Henry's jaw tightened like he was holding back something heavier than words. For a moment, neither of them moved. The festival noise swelled, but their small space felt sealed off from everything else. Then Hailey did something Henry didn't expect. She lowered her gaze back to the clipboard and picked up the next form. Not because she was dismissing him as a human being, because she was refusing to stop her life for his return. "Someone's waiting," she said, nodding toward the line of patients. Henry looked at the waiting people, then back at her, guilt deepening. "I can talk later," he offered quickly, voice rougher now. "Tonight. Tomorrow. Whenever you..." "No," Hailey cut in gently, the softness making the boundary even stronger. Henry froze. "I don't rearrange my life for men who leave," she said. Not loud, not dramatic, just true. Henry's face paled slightly, like he had expected anger, but not this kind of finality. Hailey's voice dropped lower, intimate and unbreakable. "If you have something to say, Henry, you'll have to earn the right to be heard." Henry stood there as if the ground beneath him had shifted, like he was tasting consequences for the first time. He nodded slowly once, like acceptance was the only honest thing he could offer. Then he stepped back, not fleeing, just retreating, as if he finally understood she wasn't chasing him anymore. Hailey watched him turn toward the stage where his name would be applauded. She felt something sharp rise in her throat, but she swallowed it down, because the truth was unbearable and simple at the same time. Henry was back in Meadowridge, and Hailey was no longer the woman he left behind. The festival announcement came and went like a polished storm. Henry stood on the stage beneath string lights, speaking into a microphone with practiced calm. He thanked donors, praised community resilience, talked about access and impact and future. Applause rose in waves, and Meadowridge smiled like it was being chosen by the world. Hailey watched from her booth with hands busy, face neutral, heart strangely quiet. She had learned to recognize performance even when it was wrapped in good intentions, and Henry, whatever he had become, still knew how to win a room. When the crowd dispersed, people drifted toward food stalls and music, like nothing had happened. Marcy leaned in, eyes searching Hailey's face. "Are you okay?" she asked softly, careful not to push. Hailey kept her gaze on a patient's form, voice steady. "I'm fine." It wasn't denial. It was discipline. She refused to let Henry's presence hijack her work, her day, her identity. Still, her body stayed alert, as if it expected pain to ambush her again. As the sun dropped and the festival lights began to glow, Hailey packed the booth supplies. She loaded coolers into the van, folded chairs, thanked volunteers, checked her phone for her mother's updates. She planned to drive home and sleep like a woman who had earned rest. But as she turned toward the parking lot, a shadow moved near her van. Henry stood there. No entourage, no suit jacket now, sleeves rolled up like he was trying to look human. His hair wasn't perfect anymore. The wind had stolen some of his control. Hailey stopped, not in fear, but in quiet irritation at the audacity of persistence. "I'm not here to corner you," Henry said quickly before she could speak. His voice sounded different off the stage, less smooth, more exposed. I didn't want today to be the only time I saw you." Hailey's eyes held him in place, calm and uncompromising. "You should have thought of that before you left," she replied. There was no heat in it, which made it worse for him. Henry swallowed hard, as if her calm took away all the excuses anger might have offered. The evening air smelled like fried dough and hay and late summer dust. Music drifted from the stage behind them, laughter carrying over the field, like a reminder of normal life. Henry stepped slightly closer, hands open at his sides as if showing he wasn't armed with pride. "I didn't come back to pretend," he said. "I came back because I can't carry it anymore." Hailey didn't move. "Carry what?" Henry's gaze dropped briefly, then lifted again, and there was pain in it. Real, not rehearsed. "Leaving you," he whispered. "Leaving when you needed me most." The words landed, but Hailey didn't crumble under them. She had lived with those words without him for years. She had spoken them silently at night, tasted them in the back of her throat at dawn. Now they were out loud, and still, they didn't fix anything. Hailey exhaled slowly, as if choosing control over reaction. "You want forgiveness," she said. Not accusing, simply naming the goal. Henry shook his head, but his eyes betrayed him. "I want a chance to make it right." Hailey's mouth curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. "Right," she repeated, and the single syllable carried a decade of reality. "You can't make it right," she continued softly. "You can only make it different." Henry's jaw tightened. "Tell me how." Hailey's gaze sharpened, and her voice stayed measured, almost clinical. "You don't get to ask me for instructions," she said. "You left. You figure out how to return." Henry flinched because she was correct, and correctness hurt more than cruelty. They stood in silence, and Henry's breathing sounded too loud. He looked like a man realizing that apologies weren't currency in the kind of debt he owed. "I was scared," he admitted, voice low. "I didn't know how to be what you needed." Hailey's eyes didn't soften. "So you abandoned me?" Henry nodded once, like he deserved the blunt truth. "Yes." Hailey stepped closer now, not to comfort him, but to make sure he heard every word. "I was scared too," she said. "And I still stayed." Henry's face tightened, regret pulling at the lines around his eyes. "I thought if I succeeded, if I built something, I could come back as a better man," he said. Hailey's laugh was quiet, almost sad. "That's not better. That's delayed." Henry's shoulders dropped slightly, the weight of being seen too clearly. "You think success redeems you?" Hailey continued, voice calm but cutting. "But the kind of love I needed didn't require a fortune. It required a spine." Henry looked down, and for a moment the powerful man disappeared, leaving only a boy ashamed. A couple walked past them, waving at Henry, praising his generosity. Henry nodded politely, but his eyes stayed fixed on Hailey like he couldn't escape her truth. When the couple left, Hailey spoke again, quieter now. "I'm not your punishment," she said, "and I'm not your redemption story." Henry swallowed. "I don't want to use you." Hailey held his gaze. "Then don't." Henry's hands curled slightly, like he wanted to reach for her and knew he had no right. "I loved you," he said, raw. "I still do." Hailey's expression flickered, one small crack where the past tried to breathe. But she steadied herself, because love without safety was just another kind of hunger. "You don't get to say that like it's a key," she replied. "Love isn't what you feel. It's what you do." Henry nodded, eyes shining. "Then let me do something." Hailey's voice lowered. "You already are. You're funding a project." Henry stepped forward, urgency breaking through his restraint. "That project isn't about you," he insisted, and stopped, correcting himself. "It's not about me. It's about what you built." Hailey's brow lifted, skeptical. Henry gestured toward the outreach van, the supplies, the stack of patient forms. "I asked about the outreach program," he said, voice tight with emotion. "They told me you started it, that you run it, that you're the reason people out there don't get forgotten." Hailey didn't answer, but her throat tightened at the recognition. Henry's voice dropped even lower. "You became everything I couldn't be." Hailey's eyes held steady. But inside, something shifted. Pain, yes, but also a hard-earned pride. Henry took a breath like he was stepping off a cliff. "I don't want to just donate," he said. "I want to be here. I want to help in a way that costs me something." Hailey's gaze narrowed. "Costs you what?" Henry's lips parted and the confession came out rough. "My pride," he said. "My comfort. My image." Hailey tilted her head slightly. You think that's enough? Henry's eyes filled. I think it's a start. Hailey stepped back and leaned against the van, crossing her arms. The posture wasn't defensive, it was deliberate, like a judge taking time before a verdict. Here's the truth, she said, voice low and controlled. When you left, I learned how to live without you. I learned how to stop needing you. Henry's face tightened as if those words physically hit him. Hailey continued, each sentence calm as winter air. So, if you're here to be needed, you're too late. Henry's eyes closed briefly, and when he opened them, something in him looked altered. I'm not here to be needed, he said, voice steadying. I'm here to be accountable. Hailey's jaw tightened. Accountability isn't a speech, Henry. I know, he replied, and his gaze didn't blink away. It's staying. That word, staying, hung between them like the most sacred and painful promise. Hailey felt her chest tighten, because that was the exact thing he had failed. She made herself look at him anyway. If you want to stay, Hailey said, then you don't get special access to me. Henry nodded slowly, absorbing. You don't get forgiveness on a timeline, she continued. You don't get to talk your way back into my life. Henry swallowed. Okay. Hailey's voice sharpened slightly. And you don't get to disappear the moment this gets uncomfortable. Henry's face tightened, and for a second Hailey saw fear flicker. Then something stronger replaced it. I won't run, Henry said quietly. And the quiet was where sincerity lived. Hailey studied him like a storm cloud, searching for deception, for ego, for the old escape route. She found none. Only a man standing in discomfort without blaming her for it. Still, Hailey didn't soften into romance. Not yet. She pushed off the van and lifted a box of supplies into the trunk, signaling the conversation was ending. You can start by helping without being seen, she said, voice firm. Then she looked him dead in the eyes and added the line that would become his test. Show up where it doesn't make you look good, Hailey said, and keep showing up. Henry's throat moved like he was holding back tears. He nodded once, slow and heavy, as if accepting a sentence he deserved. Hailey climbed into the van and shut the door, cutting off the space between them. Through the windshield, she saw Henry step back, hands in his pockets, shoulders bowed, not defeated, just humbled. As she drove away, her heart didn't race with hope. It whispered something far more dangerous. Maybe he was finally learning what love costs. Henry didn't call the next morning. He didn't send a long message packed with apologies or flowers meant to soften the past. Instead, Hailey arrived at the clinic parking lot before sunrise and found a surprise that felt almost unreal. A pallet of medical supplies sat near the back entrance. Gloves, bandages, antiseptic, basic meds. No banner, no press, no name printed in bold. Only a small note taped to the top box written in plain handwriting. For the outreach van. No credit needed. Hailey stared at it a long time, because she could recognize Henry's handwriting like a scar you don't forget. Her first instinct was anger, not because supplies were unwanted, but because gifts had never been the problem. The problem had been absence, silence, escape. Hailey carried the note inside, read it again, then tucked it into her pocket like evidence. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She didn't forgive. She simply went to work, because her patients didn't care about her emotional history. But all day, her mind kept circling one question with sharp, suspicious edges. Was this real change, or a polished version of the same old guilt? In the afternoon, Marcy walked into Hailey's office holding a clipboard and a confused expression. You're going to want to see this, she said. Hailey followed her outside, and there, by the outreach van, Henry stood in jeans and work boots. Not clean, brand-new charity boots, but boots already scuffed like he'd actually worn them. He was loading supplies into the van with silent focus, sleeves rolled up, hair falling forward. No one hovered around him. No camera, no applause waiting. He looked like a man trying to disappear into usefulness. And somehow, that quiet humility hit Hailey harder than any speech ever could. Henry glanced up as Hailey approached, and his face tightened with a familiar fear. He didn't step toward her like he owned the right. He didn't try to make the moment intimate. I asked Marcy what you needed, he said quietly. She gave me a list. Hailey's eyes flicked to the boxes, then back to him. You didn't have to do this, she replied. Not soft, not harsh, just factual. Henry nodded, jaw tight. I know. He lifted another box into the van like the conversation wasn't the point. Hailey waited, letting silence do the work words usually tried to force. Henry finally spoke again, voice low, steady. I'm not asking you to talk, he said. I'm not asking you to trust me. Hailey crossed her arms, studying him like she studied vital signs, looking for deception. Henry kept his gaze on the supplies as if eye contact might feel like pressure. I'm just showing up, he added, and his voice cracked slightly on the last word. Hailey felt her chest tighten because showing up was the one thing she hadn't dared to hope for. Still, she didn't give him mercy he hadn't earned. Showing up once doesn't mean anything, Hailey said calmly. Henry nodded without protest. I know. The simple acceptance disarmed her more than an argument would have. He finished loading the van, then stepped back, wiping his hands on his jeans. Where do you go tomorrow? He asked, careful. Hailey hesitated, not because she wanted to include him, but because she hated how much she respected the question. Eastridge Farms, she answered. 2 elderly couples, 1 diabetic patient, 1 prenatal check-in. Henry nodded, absorbing details like a student who finally wants to learn. I'll be here at 6, he said. If you'll let me. Hailey wanted to say no out of principle, but the outreach program was stretched thin and pride never healed a wound in the community. So she gave him a boundary instead. You're not coming for me, she said. You're coming for them. Henry met her eyes then, and something honest flickered there. I know, he said. That's why it matters. Hailey's throat tightened unexpectedly. She turned away before he could see it, and she walked back inside like her heart hadn't just stumbled. The next morning, Henry was there at 5:58, not 5 minutes late with a coffee and an excuse, not dramatically early, pacing like a man trying to be noticed, just there, leaning against the outreach van, holding a small cooler of bottled water, quiet as a promise. Hailey climbed into the driver's seat without greeting him warmly. She simply nodded once, professional, controlled. Marcy watched from the doorway, eyebrows raised like she couldn't decide whether to hope or roll her eyes. Hailey started the engine and Henry buckled his seatbelt like a man preparing for work, not romance. They drove down county roads lined with cornfields and open sky. For a while, neither spoke. Hailey let the silence stretch because she refused to fill it for his comfort. Henry stared out the window, jaw tight, as if every mile brought him closer to what he had abandoned. At the first farmhouse, an elderly man answered the door with a suspicious squint. Henry stepped back slightly, letting Hailey lead. Hailey introduced herself, checked vitals, listened to lungs, reviewed medications. Henry carried supplies, quietly wrote down notes, and didn't try to be the hero. At the second stop, a woman with brittle hands struggled to lift a heavy bag of feed. Henry moved without thinking. He lifted it, set it down gently, and asked if she needed anything else. The woman studied him for a long moment, then nodded toward his hands. Those hands don't look like farm hands, she said bluntly. Henry's face flushed, but he didn't lie. They haven't been, he admitted softly, but they should have been. Hailey heard it and felt something twist in her chest, regret spoken like truth, not like performance. She kept her expression neutral, but inside the ice shifted slightly. By midday, the heat was thick and the roads dusty. Henry handed out water bottles, held doors, listened when patients spoke. He didn't talk about his success, he didn't mention the city. He asked simple questions. How's your sleep? Do you feel safe at night? Do you have someone who checks on you? The questions weren't flashy, but they were intimate in a way money couldn't imitate. At one farm, they found a young pregnant woman alone, scared, living in a trailer with little food. Hailey stayed calm, but Henry's eyes darkened with something like shame. Not shame for the woman, for himself, for leaving a world that needed more than ambition. On the drive back, Henry finally spoke with his gaze fixed on the road. My mother got sick when I was 16, he said quietly. Hailey's hands tightened on the steering wheel, but she didn't interrupt. My dad worked all the time and I became the substitute adult, Henry continued. I promised myself I'd never be trapped like that again. His voice broke on the word trapped, and Hailey felt the truth settle in. He hadn't left because Hailey was unlovable. He had left because his past had taught him to run from need, like need was a cage. It didn't excuse him, but it explained the shape of his cowardice. Hailey kept her eyes on the road, voice low. So when my life got hard, she said, you saw your old nightmare. Henry swallowed hard. Yes. Hailey's jaw tightened. And you chose yourself. Henry nodded once, shame heavy in the movement. I did, he admitted, and I hate myself for it. Hailey's heart clenched because hatred wasn't what she wanted for him. What she wanted was change that stayed. She said nothing, because silence sometimes held more power than any argument. Over the next weeks, Henry kept showing up. He stocked shelves at the clinic without being asked. He fixed a broken step behind the outreach office like it mattered. He attended meetings and let Hailey speak without interrupting or taking credit. When a donor tried to praise Henry publicly, Henry redirected the praise toward the outreach team. And when someone mentioned Hailey's sad story, Henry didn't defend himself with excuses. He only said, she's the strongest person in this town. And he meant it like reverence. Hailey heard those words and felt something dangerous, validation she didn't need, but wanted. One evening, a storm hit suddenly, thunder cracking, rain pounding hard enough to bruise the earth. The clinic received an emergency call. A car accident on the highway, injuries, a child in shock. Hailey arrived first, already in motion, already calm. Henry followed, not hovering, not freezing, not running. He held towels, cleaned blood, kept the child talking in a gentle voice. Hailey watched him do it and felt her stomach twist with old memory. This was the moment he had failed before. Pressure, chaos, fear. And this time, he stayed. After the patient was transferred, Hailey stepped outside into wet air and deep breathing. Henry followed at a respectful distance, hands in his pockets, shoulders soaked. He didn't touch her. He didn't ask for gratitude. He only stood beside her under the awning, sharing silence while the rain fell. I wanted to run, he admitted quietly, voice rough. Hailey's eyes flicked toward him. But you didn't. Henry shook his head. No. He looked at her then, not pleading, not charming, just honest. I'm learning, he said. I'm learning how to stay. Hailey's chest tightened because the word stay carried too much history. She wanted to hate him, but hate required energy she had already spent surviving. She wanted to forgive him, but forgiveness without trust was just self-betrayal. So she chose the only thing that felt safe. Truth. Staying now doesn't erase leaving then, she said, voice steady. Henry nodded immediately. I know. Hailey swallowed hard, and for the first time her voice softened by 1 degree. But it matters, she added, almost unwillingly. Henry's eyes glistened, and he looked away like he didn't deserve that small mercy. That night, Hailey drove home with the rain fading into mist. Her mother slept peacefully, and the house felt calmer than it had in years. Hailey stood in the kitchen, looking out the window at the dark fields. She didn't feel romance. She felt something more complicated and more powerful. She felt the first fragile thread of possibility tug at her heart. Not a promise, not a reunion, just a quiet thought she didn't want to admit. If Henry could stay through storms now, what would happen when he finally had to face the one he caused? By the time the first frost kissed the fields, Henry had become a familiar presence at the clinic. Not celebrated, not forgiven, just present. The way steady things become part of a routine. He showed up before dawn, unlocked supply rooms, carried boxes, fixed what was broken without announcing it. He learned the names of patients and the details of their lives with a quiet kind of respect. Hailey watched from a distance, always measuring, always cautious. Because consistency could be an act, too, until life tested it hard enough to reveal the truth. And Hailey had learned the difference between a man trying and a man changing. One morning, the outreach van wouldn't start. The engine coughed, sputtered, then died like it had decided to quit on purpose. Marcy groaned, already calculating missed appointments, angry phone calls, delayed medications. Hailey reached for her list, mind racing through alternatives with practiced precision. Before she could speak, Henry slid under the hood, sleeves rolled, breath forming in the cold air. "I'll handle it," he said simply, and his voice held no ego, only responsibility. An hour later, the van started, and no one in the town knew Henry had saved a day that mattered. Hailey should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt a strange tension in her chest, like gratitude was pressing against an old wound. Because gratitude to her had always been dangerous. It made you soften. It made you open. It made you risk believing. And believing was what had shattered her the first time. So she kept her face neutral and said only, "Thank you." Henry nodded once, as if that small word was more than he deserved. That same week, her mother's follow-up appointment came with a new complication. The cardiologist mentioned a procedure. Routine, he said, but the cost still made Hailey's stomach tighten. She sat in the exam room, nodding, taking notes, hiding fear behind competence. Her mother watched her with gentle eyes and said softly, "You don't have to carry everything alone." Hailey forced a smile. "I'm fine." But on the drive home, her hands gripped the wheel so hard her knuckles whitened. She didn't notice Henry's car behind her until she pulled into the driveway and saw him park at the curb. Henry stepped out slowly, like he knew he was entering sacred territory. He didn't walk up the driveway like he belonged. He stopped at the bottom of the porch steps and waited, giving Hailey the power to decide distance. "I saw your mom's name on the schedule," he said quietly. "I didn't ask details." Hailey's posture stiffened. "Then why are you here?" Henry swallowed. "Because you looked like you were bracing for impact." Hailey's throat tightened, anger and vulnerability mixing into something sharp. "I'm always bracing," she replied. "That's what happens when people leave." Henry nodded like he accepted the accusation as fact, not insult. "I know," he said, "and I'm sorry I made your world like that." Hailey crossed her arms, the porch light catching the edge of her tired expression. She wanted to tell him to go away, to protect the fragile balance she had built, but her mother's cough drifted from inside, and the night air felt too cold for pride. Henry remained still, hands open at his sides. "I'm not here to fix it," he said. "I'm here to be here." Hailey stared at him, because that was the kind of sentence she used to crave. She let him sit at the kitchen table while her mother drank tea. It wasn't warm hospitality, it was cautious permission. Henry spoke politely, listened more than he talked, smiled at her mother with genuine respect. When her mother mentioned the outreach program, Henry's eyes flicked to Hailey with quiet admiration. Hailey didn't let the moment become tender. She cleared dishes, kept the conversation practical, refused to let nostalgia slip in through the cracks. Still, when Henry left, he paused at the doorway and said softly, "You're doing more than surviving, you're saving people." Hailey didn't answer, but after the door closed, her hands shook slightly over the sink. The next day, a blizzard warning rolled across the county like a threat. Meadowridge wasn't dramatic about weather, but this storm had weight. Heavy snow, high winds, dangerous roads. The clinic prepared for accidents, power outages, isolated patients needing urgent help. Hailey stayed late, organizing emergency kits, checking contact lists, making sure the outreach team was ready. Henry stayed too. He didn't ask if he could. He simply stayed, folding blankets, charging flashlights, loading extra supplies. When the first snow began to fall, thick and fast, the town seemed to hold its breath. And Hailey felt something inside her tighten with memory. Storms were where abandonment had begun. The emergency call came just after midnight. An elderly couple on East Ridge had lost power. The husband's oxygen machine had stopped. Hailey grabbed her coat, keys, and emergency bag in one smooth motion. Marcy started to speak. Roads were bad, visibility near zero, but Hailey was already moving. Henry caught up to her at the door, boots on, coat zipped, eyes steady. "I'm coming," he said. Hailey didn't have time to argue. "Stay in the passenger seat and follow instructions," she snapped. Henry nodded without offense. "Yes," and they drove into the storm like it was a test neither could escape. The road disappeared under white sheets, headlights cutting through snow like weak blades. Wind hit the car hard enough to make the steering wheel vibrate under Hailey's hands. Her heart pounded, but her mind stayed focused. Oxygen, pulse, backup plan, emergency route. Henry watched her drive with something like awe and shame. He remembered too. He remembered the rain, the fear, the moment he chose escape. Now trapped inside a storm beside her, he could feel the weight of what he had refused to carry. A deer darted across the road, and Hailey swerved with a controlled sharpness that saved them. Henry's breath caught. "Are you okay?" he asked. Hailey didn't look at him. "I don't have the luxury of not being okay." They reached the farmhouse, its windows dark, snow piled against the door like a barricade. Hailey pushed inside, calling out, her flashlight beam bouncing across the room. The old man sat in a chair, lips tinged blue, breathing shallow without the oxygen. His wife cried softly, hands shaking as she held a blanket around him. Hailey moved with trained speed, setting up the portable oxygen, checking vitals, speaking calm into fear. Henry knelt to connect a battery pack, hands steady despite cold and adrenaline. The machine hummed back to life, and the old man's chest rose deeper, stronger. The wife turned to Henry with tears streaming. "Thank you," she whispered. Henry's voice broke. "She's the reason," he said, nodding toward Hailey. "She always shows up." On the drive back, the storm intensified, and the car slid slightly on a patch of ice. Hailey corrected instantly, her jaw tight, her gaze locked forward. Henry's hands gripped the seat, but he didn't tell her to slow down. He didn't question her competence. He trusted her. And in that trust, Hailey felt something unfamiliar. A sense of not being alone in crisis. It didn't heal the past, but it softened the present. When they finally reached the clinic parking lot, snow thick on the windshield, Hailey sat there breathing hard. Henry turned toward her carefully. "You saved his life," he said. Hailey whispered, almost bitter. "That's what I do." Henry's eyes shone. "You did it even when I made your life heavier." Hailey's throat tightened, anger rising, because truth felt like exposure. "Don't," she warned, voice low. "Don't make this about you." Henry nodded immediately. "You're right." He exhaled, then said the words that surprised her with their maturity. "I'm not asking you to comfort me," he said. "I'm just naming what I did." Hailey stared at him, because most men defended themselves before they confessed. Henry didn't. He sat in the quiet, taking responsibility like it belonged to him. "My leaving didn't just hurt you," he continued. "It changed you." Hailey swallowed hard, eyes burning. "Yes." Henry's voice dropped, raw and steady. "And if you ever let me close again, I will spend my life proving I'm not that man anymore." The words were powerful, but Hailey didn't melt into them. She had heard vows before. Still, she couldn't deny what her eyes had seen tonight. Henry had been terrified, and he stayed. He had been cold, and he became useful. He had been proud, and he had learned to be quiet. Hailey looked away. Blinking against sudden tears she refused to release in front of him. When she spoke, her voice was controlled but softer than before. "Change doesn't happen in one storm," she said. "It happens in 1,000 ordinary days." Henry nodded. "Then I'll be here for all of them." After the blizzard, Meadowridge moved differently. People talked about the outreach team braving the storm, saving lives. Some mentioned Henry, surprised to see him working without a spotlight. Others still held his past against him, and Hailey didn't correct them. She wasn't his defender. She was not the woman who polished a man's reputation. Henry didn't seem to want defending. He kept showing up, accepting the town's mixed reactions like consequences he had earned. And in quiet moments, Hailey caught him watching her like he was learning reverence instead of possession. One evening, Hailey found him behind the clinic fixing a broken outdoor light. The cold air made his breath visible, and his fingers looked numb. "You could have asked maintenance," Hailey said. Henry shrugged. "Maintenance is overloaded. This takes 5 minutes." Hailey leaned against the doorframe, watching him work. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was heavy with things neither rushed anymore. Henry tightened a screw, then spoke without looking at her. "I used to think love was a feeling," he said quietly. Hailey didn't answer. Henry's voice grew rougher. Now I think love is endurance. Hailey's chest tightened at the word endurance because she had mastered it alone. She stepped closer, not touching him, just near enough for truth. I don't know if I can ever trust you the way I did, she admitted, voice low. Henry's hands paused on the light fixture, then continued working as if he couldn't afford to make her vulnerable moment bigger than it was. You shouldn't trust me the way you did, he said softly. Hailey blinked, surprised. You trusted me with your heart before I earned it. Henry continued. That was love. That was innocence. He turned toward her then, eyes steady, humble. If you ever trust me again, it should be different, stronger, built, chosen. Hailey's throat tightened because he finally understood what she had become. That night, Hailey lay in bed listening to the wind outside and the quiet inside. She thought about the storm, the oxygen machine, the way Henry didn't run. She thought about his words, love is endurance, and how endurance had been her entire life. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine something she had forbidden. Not a fairy tale, not a rushed reunion. A partnership built slowly, like a fence repaired plank by plank. And the thought scared her more than loneliness ever had. Because if she let Henry close again, he would be close enough to break her twice. The town's memory was long, and Meadowridge loved a clean story. A man leaves, a woman suffers. A man returns successful and generous. People preferred that version because it kept the world simple and men respectable. But Hailey lived inside the version that wasn't simple at all. She carried it in the way she flinched at sudden silence, in the way she planned for disaster like it was a season, not a surprise. And the closer Henry stood to her now, the more that old wound demanded truth. It happened on a Monday morning, the kind that should have been ordinary. Hailey walked into the diner to pick up coffee for the outreach team. Two men at the counter were talking loud, not noticing her at first. Caldwell's a good man, one said. He's saving this town with his money. The other chuckled. He didn't leave her, you know. She pushed him away. Hailey's fingers tightened around the coffee tray, heat biting her skin. She didn't speak. She just turned and walked out into cold air like it didn't hurt. Henry saw her outside because he always seemed to appear when she least wanted witnesses. He took one look at her face and understood something had happened. Hailey tried to pass him, but Henry stepped aside, blocking her path without touching her. Tell me, he said softly. And his voice held no demand, only concern. Hailey's eyes burned, but she kept her spine straight like it was a vow. They're rewriting it, she said. They're making me the villain so you can be the hero. Henry's jaw tightened, and something dark moved behind his eyes, shame turning into resolve. I won't let that stand, Henry said, and Hailey almost laughed at the simplicity, because he didn't get to control the town's mouth any more than she did. Hailey shook her head, voice clipped. You can't fix that with another donation. Henry swallowed hard. I know, he replied. That's why I'm not using money. Hailey's chest tightened, suspicious by instinct. Then what are you going to do? Henry looked at her steadily and his voice came out rough but certain. I'm going to tell the truth, he said. Even if it costs me everything I built. That night, Meadowridge gathered at the town hall for an update on the clinic expansion. The room smelled like old wood, coffee, and the small-town habit of watching closely. Hailey sat near the back with Marcy, arms crossed, expression calm and guarded. Henry stood at the front beside officials and donors, looking too polished for the room. But when he began to speak, his voice wasn't polished anymore. It was quieter, slower, like a man choosing each word because he understood their weight. And Hailey felt her pulse shift, because she recognized the sound of courage being forced into existence. I'm here because this town deserves care, Henry said, eyes sweeping the room. And I'm here because I owe this town the truth about why I left it. A murmur ran through the crowd, surprise cracking the comfortable narrative. Henry's hands tightened on the podium as if it could hold him upright. 2 years ago, Hailey needed me, he continued, voice strained. She had a family crisis, hospital bills, and a life collapsing under responsibility. And I walked away because I was selfish, scared, and unworthy of her trust. The room went so silent it felt like snow falling. Soft, heavy, absolute. Hailey's breath caught, and she hated that her eyes stung in public. Henry kept going, not seeking sympathy, not looking at her for rescue. "I've heard people say she pushed me away," he said, voice firm now. "That is a lie," Henry added, and his gaze held the room like a warning. "She asked me to stay. She asked me to love her through something hard. And I failed her, completely publicly, and without excuse." A woman in the front row whispered, "Oh my God," like truth was a shock. Hailey's hands curled into fists in her lap, nails pressing into skin. Not because she wanted to punish Henry, but because being seen still felt unsafe. Henry lifted his chin, and his voice dropped, raw and unprotected. "I didn't come back to buy forgiveness," he said. "I can't. I came back because she built what I refused to carry. And this project exists because Hailey created it, long before my money arrived." Henry turned slightly toward the outreach team seated along the side wall. "Every life you're helping," he said, "is because she showed up when I didn't." He stepped away from the podium, moving closer to where Hailey sat. The room watched like it was holding a collective breath, waiting for drama. But Henry didn't reach for Hailey or try to pull her into a public moment. He simply stopped a few feet away and said, "Quiet enough to be intimate, loud enough to be true. Hailey doesn't owe me anything," he said, "but she deserves honor for what she became." After the meeting, people swarmed Henry with stunned faces and awkward apologies. Some tried to praise his bravery, but Henry didn't accept it like a prize. He redirected conversations toward the clinic, the outreach routes, the actual work. Hailey slipped out the side door, heart pounding, throat tight, needing air. The night wind hit her cheeks like a slap, cold and clarifying. She stood under the street lamp, staring at the dark fields beyond town. For the first time, the story wasn't being told about her without her consent. Henry found her outside, but he stayed a respectful distance away. He didn't touch her, didn't ask for credit, didn't demand a response. "I'm sorry," he said softly, and the apology sounded different now. Not like a line, but like a consequence he'd accepted and carried into daylight. Hailey swallowed, her voice shaking despite her effort to keep it steady. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. "You could have protected your image." Henry's eyes glistened. "That image was built on your pain," he said. "I don't want it." Hailey stared at him, and the anger inside her didn't disappear, but it changed shape. Less fire, more exhaustion, more truth. "I don't know what to do with this," she admitted, voice low. Henry nodded, as if that uncertainty was fair and expected. "You don't have to do anything," he replied. "Not tonight. Not soon." Hailey's breath trembled. "Do you understand what you risked?" Henry's jaw tightened. "Yes," he said, "and I should have risked it years ago." When Hailey got home, her mother was awake in her recliner, blanket over her knees. She looked up with soft eyes, reading Hailey's face like a familiar language. "I heard," her mother said quietly. "People are talking." Hailey set her keys down, shoulders suddenly heavy as if the night had added weight. Her mother reached out, taking Hailey's hand in both of hers. "He told the truth," her mother whispered, and there was relief in her voice. Hailey swallowed hard. "Truth doesn't erase what it cost," she replied. But her eyes were wet. The next day, Hailey found an envelope on the clinic desk with no official letterhead. Inside was a handwritten note. Not long, not dramatic, not sweet. It listed names, patients who needed transportation, homes that needed repairs, supplies the outreach team lacked. At the bottom, Henry wrote, "Tell me where to start. I'll do the work." Quietly, Hailey held the note, fingers trembling slightly, because it wasn't romantic. It was practical, consistent, and humble, the language she trusted most. And for the first time, she didn't fold the note away like evidence. She kept it on her desk like a plan. Weeks passed, and Henry kept his word with a stubbornness that felt almost sacred. He drove patients to appointments without telling anyone important. He repaired porches, fixed heaters, delivered groceries in snow without a single photo. He paid clinic fees anonymously when someone couldn't, then let Hailey take the credit for finding resources. The town slowly stopped whispering and started watching in a new way. Not waiting for Henry to leave again, but waiting to see if he truly understood staying. Hailey watched too, and the trust inside her rebuilt like bone. Slow, painful, real. One evening after a long day, Hailey found Henry behind the clinic loading blankets into the van. His hands were red from cold, his coat dusted with snow, his expression tired but steady. Hailey stood there a moment, letting herself observe without armor. Henry looked up, startled, like he still didn't expect kindness from her. Hailey's voice came out low, controlled, but gentler than it had been in months. "Have you eaten?" she asked, and the question felt dangerous. Small, human, opening a door. Henry blinked, then shook his head slowly. "No," he admitted, and his voice sounded younger. Hailey hesitated, the old fear rising. If she offered warmth, would he leave again? But she remembered the town hall, the storm, the 1,000 ordinary days he stayed. She nodded toward her truck, heart pounding like it was stepping into risk on purpose. "My mom made stew," she said, as if making it casual could make it safe. Henry's breath caught, and he didn't move like he was entitled to the invitation. "Only if it's okay," he said quietly. "Only if it doesn't cost you peace." Hailey met his eyes, and for the first time her answer held something like choice instead of defense. "It's okay," she said, "but we take it slow." At the farmhouse, the porch light glowed warm against the dark, gentle as a second chance. Hailey opened the door and let Henry step inside. Not into her heart, not yet, but into her home. Her mother smiled softly, and Henry's eyes filled like he was holding back a lifetime of regret. They ate in quiet, simple conversation, the kind that doesn't need romance to feel intimate. When Henry stood to leave, he paused at the doorway, hands shaking slightly in restraint. Hailey didn't hug him, didn't kiss him, didn't promise what she couldn't guarantee. But she touched his arm once, brief, steady, real. And Henry closed his eyes like that touch was forgiveness beginning. After that dinner, nothing became magically easy. The past didn't dissolve because stew was shared and truth was spoken. Hailey still woke up some nights with her heart racing, convinced she'd hear a goodbye. Henry still carried a reflex to retreat when emotions grew too raw. But something had changed, quietly, steadily, like a river shifting course over time. They began meeting in the in-between spaces of life, early mornings at the clinic, late evenings on the porch. Not as lovers rushing toward a fairy tale, but as two adults learning how to rebuild what fear destroyed. Henry didn't try to reclaim the old relationship. He didn't say, "We were good once," like the past was a bargaining chip. Instead, he asked practical questions that sounded like devotion. "What do you need this week? Where can I take pressure off you? What would make you feel safe?" Hailey answered carefully, choosing honesty over pride, boundaries over bitterness. She didn't punish him for the sake of power. She simply required what she should have always been allowed to require: consistency. The clinic expansion finally moved from meetings to action. A new wing was approved, rural telehealth equipment ordered, additional staff hired. People congratulated Henry in public, but Henry redirected praise like he was trained now. "This wouldn't exist without Hailey," he said more than once, and he never made it romantic. He honored her work as work, her strength as strength, not as a storyline for his redemption. Hailey watched, uncomfortable with attention but relieved by his refusal to erase her labor. And slowly, Meadowridge stopped calling her the woman who was left. They started calling her the woman who led. One Saturday afternoon, Hailey drove out to East Ridge alone to deliver medication. Snow dusted the fields, turning fences into soft lines across the landscape. When she returned, she found Henry at her farm, repairing a section of fence that had leaned too long. He wasn't inside her house, wasn't claiming space that wasn't offered. He was outside, in the cold, doing something that mattered but wouldn't be seen. Hailey stood by her truck and watched him for a moment, heart tight with a strange ache. Because this was the version of him she had needed in the beginning. Henry noticed her and straightened, wiping his hands on his jeans. "I saw the post was loose," he said softly, as if explaining his presence could make it less risky. Hailey nodded, stepping closer, boots crunching on frozen ground. "You didn't have to," she replied, but her voice wasn't sharp anymore. Henry's gaze held hers, steady and humble. "I know," he said. "I wanted to." Hailey looked at the fence, then back at him. And suddenly, the words she'd been avoiding rose in her throat like a storm. "I'm scared," Hailey admitted quietly, surprising herself with the honesty. Henry's face shifted. Concern, guilt, attentiveness. Like he was learning how to hold pain instead of fleeing it. "Of what?" he asked, voice gentle. Hailey swallowed hard. "Of believing you." The sentence landed between them like a fragile glass held in shaking hands. "I can handle hard days," Hailey continued, eyes shining. "I can handle storms and bills and exhaustion. I've proven that." Her voice dropped, raw. "I don't know if I can handle being left twice." Henry's throat worked visibly. He stepped forward but stopped before crossing her space. "I deserve that fear," he said, voice rough. "And I won't argue with it." Hailey's eyes burned. "Then tell me how I'm supposed to trust you." Henry's jaw tightened, not with pride but with determination. "You're not supposed to trust my words," he said. "Not yet." He looked around the farm, fields, fence lines, the porch light waiting for night. Then he said quietly, "Trust my pattern. Trust my staying. And when you doubt it, test it." Hailey blinked, startled. "Test it?" Henry nodded. "Ask me to show up. Anywhere. Anytime. And I will." In the weeks that followed, Hailey did exactly that. Not to punish him, but to protect herself. When her mother had an early appointment, Henry was in the driveway before dawn. When the outreach van needed maintenance, Henry handled it without complaint. When a patient needed transport during a snowstorm, Henry drove without hesitation. Hailey watched each moment like a scientist observing a fragile experiment, and each time Henry showed up, something inside her loosened, fraction by fraction. Trust didn't arrive like lightning. It arrived like sunrise, slow, steady, impossible to stop once it began. On New Year's Eve, Meadowridge gathered at the community center for a simple celebration. There were string lights, paper cups of cider, children in knitted hats chasing each other across the hall. Hailey didn't plan to go, but Marcy insisted, and her mother smiled and said, "Go breathe a little." So Hailey arrived in a simple sweater, hair down, cheeks pink from cold. She stayed near the edges, watching everyone like she still wasn't fully used to ease. Then she saw Henry across the room. Not the man on the festival stage, not the polished donor. Just Henry, standing by the coffee table, laughing softly at something an old farmer said. And when his eyes met hers, his smile faded into something deeper, something that looked like reverence. He walked toward her slowly, not rushing, as if speed might break the trust they'd been building. "I didn't think you'd come," he said quietly. "I almost didn't," Hailey admitted. Henry nodded, understanding without pressure. They stood together as the room filled with countdown energy, voices rising, hope becoming contagious. Hailey felt strangely exposed, because celebrations made space for feelings she usually kept locked away. Henry didn't touch her, but his presence beside her felt steady, protective, earned. "Thank you," Hailey said softly, and her voice surprised her with its tenderness. Henry swallowed. "For what?" "For staying," she answered, and the two words carried everything. As the countdown began, 10, 9, 8, Henry's hand hovered slightly near hers. He didn't take it without permission. Hailey looked down at his hand, then up at his face, reading the restraint like it was its own kind of love. 5, 4, 3. Her heart pounded, not with fear, but with a quiet, trembling possibility. 2, 1. Cheers erupted, confetti fell, people hugged, kissed, laughed. Hailey turned toward Henry, and for a second the world around them blurred into soft light and sound. Henry didn't move first. He waited, and that waiting was the clearest proof of all. So Hailey made the choice herself, slowly reaching out and placing her hand in his. Henry's fingers closed around hers with a gentleness that felt like an apology without words. He didn't pull her close dramatically. He just stood there holding her hand like it was something sacred and fragile. Hailey's eyes stung, and she hated that she was close to crying in a room full of people. But she didn't look away this time. She met Henry's gaze, and her voice came out soft, but steady. "This doesn't mean the past didn't happen," she said. Henry nodded, eyes shining. "I know. It means," Hailey continued, breathing, choosing, "I'm willing to build something new." Henry's breath shook as if he'd been holding it for years. He led her outside into the cold night, away from the noise into quiet snow and soft streetlight. The town looked peaceful, windows glowing, cars dusted white, the sky wide and dark above them. Henry turned to face her, hands trembling slightly with emotion he didn't hide anymore. "I don't want to promise you perfection," he said. "I don't deserve that." Hailey's chin lifted. "Good," she whispered. "I don't want perfection. I want presence." Henry nodded, tears bright in his eyes. "Then let my life be the promise." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small, not a ring, not a dramatic gesture. A key. Hailey stared, confused. Henry held it out carefully. "It's for the clinic storage unit," he explained. "I bought the building next door so the outreach program never has to beg for space again." Hailey's breath caught. "I put it in the clinic's name," Henry added quickly, voice raw. "Not mine. Not yours. The community's." Hailey blinked hard because that was the kind of action that cost something real. Not money, ego, ownership, control. Henry swallowed. "I wanted you to see that I'm not here to take. I'm here to give. And to stay." Hailey's fingers closed around the key and her hand shook. She looked at Henry, searching his face for the old escape route. There was none. Only a man who finally understood that love wasn't a trophy. It was a commitment to remain when leaving would be easier. Hailey's voice broke slightly. "You didn't have to do this." Henry's mouth curved in a sad, sincere smile. "I know," he said. "I wanted to build something that outlives my mistake." Hailey stepped closer, close enough to feel his breath in the cold air. "And what about us?" she whispered. "What are you building here?" Henry's hands lifted slowly, stopping just short of touching her cheeks. "Whatever you let me," he said, and the humility in it nearly undid her. Hailey's eyes filled and she hated how much she wanted to lean into him. But she remembered the porch, the rain, the taillights. So she set the rules like vows. "If you come back into my life," she said softly, "you don't get to disappear when it's hard." Henry nodded immediately, voice rough. "Never. You don't get to use my love as proof you've changed," Hailey continued. "Your actions prove it." Henry swallowed. "Yes. And you don't get the old me," she finished, voice trembling but strong. "You earned the woman I became." Henry's eyes spilled over, and he nodded like that was the most honorable challenge he'd ever been given. Hailey lifted her hand and finally touched his face. Gentle, deliberate, real. Henry closed his eyes like her touch was a homecoming he didn't deserve. "You hurt me," Hailey whispered. And the words were not an accusation now. Just truth. Henry's voice cracked. "I know, and I healed without you," she continued. Henry's breath shook. "I know." Hailey's thumb brushed his cheek and she looked at him with a courage that matched his staying. "But I don't want to live numb forever," she said, tears slipping. "I want to believe again." Henry leaned closer, careful, waiting for permission even in intimacy. Hailey gave it with one small nod, and Henry's hands gently held her waist like he was afraid to break the moment. Then he kissed her, slow, tender, earned, like a promise spoken in silence. When they pulled back, Hailey rested her forehead against his, breath visible in the cold night. Behind them, the community center lights glowed, warm and steady like a second chance that didn't rush. Henry whispered, "I'm here," as if those two words were the only vow that mattered. Hailey closed her eyes and let herself feel it. Presence, warmth, safety built day by day. She didn't pretend the past was gone. She simply chose a future that didn't belong to fear anymore. And under the soft fall of snow with Henry's arms around her, Hailey realized something that made her chest ache with hope. Love didn't return the way it used to be. It returned stronger, because this time it was built to last. The next morning, Meadowridge woke up quiet, wrapped in a clean layer of snow and the softness of a new year. The kind of morning that didn't erase the past, but somehow made space for breathing again. Hailey stood at the kitchen window with a mug of coffee warming her hands, watching the fields glow pale under early sunlight. Her mother sat behind her, humming softly, the house filled with the gentle sounds of life returning to normal. Nothing in that room looked like a miracle, and yet Hailey felt like she was standing inside one. Because the miracle wasn't that Henry had come back rich. It wasn't that he had a polished story or a generous checkbook. The miracle was smaller and harder. He stayed. He showed up on the mornings when the roads were icy and the world felt heavy. He loaded supplies when no one was watching. He drove the elderly to appointments, repaired broken steps, carried groceries, fixed fences. He listened to people who had been invisible for too long. And every time Hailey tested the pattern, Henry answered the test with the same quiet proof. Presence. A week later, they stood together outside the clinic, watching workers unload equipment for the new outreach space. The sign on the door didn't carry Henry's name. It read, Meadowridge Community Outreach. Simple, honest, belonging to everyone. Marcy hugged Hailey so tightly she almost laughed. Look what you built, Marcy whispered, voice thick with pride. Hailey's eyes stung because she knew the truth. She had built it. With tired hands, with stubborn faith, with a heart that refused to collapse. Henry stood beside her, hands tucked in his coat pockets, watching the program move forward like it was sacred. When someone thanked him, he redirected it without hesitation. She's the reason, he said every time. And he never said it like a romantic line. He said it like honor. Later that evening, Hailey and Henry walked the fence line of the farm as the sky turned pink and gold. The air smelled like winter and soil and the promise of spring buried beneath it. Henry didn't fill the silence with grand declarations. He didn't try to convince her with speeches. He simply reached for her hand, slowly, with permission still written into every movement. Hailey let him take it. Not because she forgot what he had done, but because she had watched who he had become. They stopped near the porch, the same porch where the story had once broken. The same driveway where taillights had once disappeared into rain. Henry turned toward her, eyes steady, voice quiet. I can't undo what I did, he said. But I can spend the rest of my life doing the opposite. Hailey stared at him, her heart swelling with a feeling that wasn't naive anymore. It was mature, earned, built out of 1,000 ordinary days. She lifted her hand, touched his cheek, and her voice came out soft and unshaking. Then don't promise me forever, she whispered. Promise me today. Henry's breath hitched. I promise you today, he said, and tomorrow, and every day after that, if you'll let me. Hailey didn't rush. She didn't pretend pain never happened. She didn't hand him her heart like it was weightless. She leaned in anyway, slow, deliberate, and kissed him under the porch light that once watched her stand alone. This time, the light didn't witness abandonment. It witnessed restoration. And as Henry wrapped his arms around her, steady, warm, undeniable, Hailey finally allowed the thought she had been afraid to believe. Love could come back. Not as a repeat of the past, but as a redemption of it. Because in the end, it wasn't Henry's success that healed her. It was his staying. If this story made you feel something, if you're still learning how to trust, how to heal, how to believe in love again, type, I choose to believe in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to Redeemed Hearts for more cinematic stories of second chances, forgiveness, and love that truly redeems.